Today, we are in 1 Samuel chapter 5. So I'll read that for you. And it looks like I'm kind of in the darkness there. And so I'll move this a little over closer to the light to get some light on my face. But right now it serves as a nice thing to be able to read, even though I'm going to be reading the rest of the sermon anyway. But anyway, here we go. So, 1 Samuel chapter 5. When the Philistines captured the ark of God, they brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it into the house of Dagon and set it up beside Dagon. And when the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and put him back in his place. But when they rose early on the next morning, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord, and the head of Dagon and both his hands were lying cut off in the threshold. Only the trunk of Dagon was left to him. This is why the priests of Dagon and all who enter the house of Dagon do not tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. The hand of the Lord was heavy against the people of Ashdod, and he terrified and afflicted them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. And when the men of Ashdod saw how things were, they said, the ark of God, the ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is hard against us and against Dagon our God. So they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, what shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? They answered, let the ark of the God of Israel be brought around to Gath. So they brought the ark of the God of Israel there, but after they had brought it around, the hand of the Lord was against the city, causing a very great panic, and he afflicted the men of the city, both young and old, so that tumors broke out on them. So they sent the ark of God to Ekron. But as soon as the ark of God came to Ekron, the people of Ekron cried out, they have brought around to us the ark of the God of Israel to kill us and our people. They sent therefore and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, send away the ark of the God of Israel and let it return to its own place, that it may not kill us and our people. For there was a deathly panic throughout the whole city. The hand of God was very heavy there. The men who did not die were struck with tumors, and the cry of the city went up to heaven. What end can your gods bring you? What good can the things that you worship, the things that you devote your time and your love to, what can they bring you? We all have idols, things that we prioritize ahead of God, at least at some points during the day, especially because we sin. If we were to prioritize God ahead of everything 24/7, we wouldn't sin. But we're weak, and we're forgetful, and honestly, oftentimes we're just unwilling. We give our time, our devotion to other loves that we have, or other things that we deem more important. Where is our love for Jesus? Often I know it can just feel like it's just hanging on by a thread, as so many different things around us fight for our affection and for our attention, especially in a place like where we live, where we are so rich, really, in terms of money and in terms of freedom. I mean, I know a lot of people in Canada and the US don't like Christianity and are very against it, but we don't die for our beliefs here. Not really. And with our riches too, we have access to so many things like entertainment and sports, and even just seeing other people's stuff, like big houses or nice vehicles or things that make us think that that's what I should strive for in my life. I should strive for that. I should strive for money to buy those things. Or, maybe your thing is just that you want to be very well liked, so you idolize how you seem in other people's eyes. And Maybe that affects your willingness to share with them the truth, whether that means the gospel or that actually means even just sharing the truth about your own life. You know, people are ashamed about things and they lie about their lives. But what's the point of all that? In 2 Corinthians 4:17-18, Paul is talking to people who are suffering for their faith. He says, "For this light, momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal." And I know we do face a lot of hardships. There are a lot of struggles that we'll be happy to be rid of that do push us closer to Jesus. And it's great to know that those afflictions are momentary, that they don't last beyond this life, that we have perfection in heaven waiting for us if we've repented of our sin and put our faith in Jesus and in his death and resurrection. But what about non-hardships? We don't face hostility like those whom Paul is writing to, or like those in other countries being killed and tortured for their faith. We live so richly compared to them, and with all the good that we have here, we often don't see God as needed. Not as much anyway, right? We see other things as needed. We see material goods as needed. We see our idols as needed. Whatever betters us, that's needed. What's the point of that? Paul says the things that are seen are transient. They don't last. So why do we pursue them so heavily? But the things that are unseen are eternal. They last forever. The unseen. If only we could shift our focus to what's eternal. But it's hard because of literally our eyes, right? We see and we want and we love what we see. We get so invested in it, but it won't last, right? So let us look not to the things that are seen, right? But instead to the things that are unseen. Because what end can what is seen bring you? To what end can your material goods bring you? To what end can your idols bring you? Or as we can call them, false gods. To what end can your gods bring you? Let's look at the god of the Philistines, Dagon. He's kind of like a merman. In the previous chapter, we read about how God's people Israel were defeated by the Philistines. Their bad shepherds, Hophni and Phinehas, and also their father Eli, died, and the Ark of the Covenant was captured. And so the Philistines think this is a huge victory by their people because of their god, the false god Dagon. Why Israel was defeated, though, was because of their own sin. It wasn't because of the Philistine god being better than the real God. Not at all, right? But the Philistines don't know that, so this story starts off with the Philistines bringing who they think is the defeated God, residing on the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, before who they think is the victorious God, Dagon. So let's again read 1 Samuel 5. When the Philistines captured the Ark of God, they brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then the Philistines took the Ark of God and brought it into the house of Dagon and set it up beside Dagon. And when the people of Ashdod rose the next day, behold, Dagon had fallen on his face downward on the ground before the Ark of the Lord. So it almost seems like the statue of Dagon has fallen over in worship of the one true God. It looks like that's how God set it up. This false god is beneath me, falls at my feet. So they took Dagon and put him back in his place. The people need to help Dagon up. What kind of God is that? That needs man to defend him, to pick him up and put him back in his place. But when they rose early on the next morning, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord, and the head of Dagon and both his hands were lying cut off on the threshold. Only the trunk of Dagon was left to him. This is why the priests of Dagon and all who enter the house of Dagon do not tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. Dagon was nothing. We've seen man have to come to the aid of Dagon. The man has to come to the defense of Dagon. What about God? Does anyone need to come to his defense? Does an Israelite need to come rescue the Ark of the Covenant? The hand of the Lord was heavy against the people of Ashdod, and he terrified and afflicted them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. And when the men of Ashdod saw how things were, they said, the ark of God, the ark of the God of Israel, must not remain with us, for his hand is hard against us and against Dagon, our God. So they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, what shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? They answered, let the ark of the God of Israel be brought around to Gath. So they brought the ark of the God of Israel there, but after they had brought it around, the hand of the Lord was against the city, causing a very great panic. And he afflicted the men of the city, both young and old, so that tumors broke out on them. So they sent the ark of God to Ekron, but as soon as the ark of God came to Ekron, the people of Ekron cried out, they have brought around to us the ark of the God of Israel to kill us and our people. They sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, send away the ark of the God of Israel and let it return to its own place, that it may not kill us and our people. For there was a deathly panic throughout the whole city. The hand of God was very heavy there. The men who did not die were struck with tumors, and the cry of the city went up to heaven. No man of Israel even needs to retrieve the ark. God does it himself. He causes the Philistines to die or to get tumors, so they get frightened of it, sending it city to city before getting rid of it entirely, returning it to Israel. No man of Israel needs to come rescue the ark. Isn't that amazing? The Philistines' victory over Israel had not come from Dagon. It had come from the Lord. God shows them his superiority over Dagon by taking down his statue twice, the second time decapitating it and taking off its hands. Then, through a series of cities getting tumors and facing death also, God makes it so that his Ark of the Covenant is returned. I just think that's amazing. The Israelites see that God is a God worth following. He does not need man to help him. God is a God worth following. God is greater than Dagon, of course. That's what we've seen. So I look at this story and I look at my own life and I see also in the same way, God is a God worth following, and he is greater and more important than my idols, than anything in my life. So let's think again. What can your gods bring you? What good can the things that you worship, the things that you devote your time and your love to, what can they bring you? What can your idols bring you? They can bring you a lot in the eyes of the world. A lot of material goods, a lot of fame, maybe a lot of academic success or athletic success. Right? You can get those things if you pursue them hard enough. But all that you gain from those idols are good things on earth that don't transfer to heaven. They could even be bad things on earth. But either way, even the good things, they don't transfer to heaven. In fact, if you choose to follow the things of this world instead of following God, there will be no heaven. Now, in talking to my congregation back when I first preached this, I said most of us, though I would guess, are in a place where we do follow God, where we've repented of our sin and made the choice to follow Jesus, believing in him and what he did for us on the cross, where he died for our sin. And then he later rose again from the tomb, right? We do have heaven in our future, but we get distracted by these things that don't matter in the long run, right? Often slipping and devoting our time and energy to them while putting God to the side. I do that too. I know I do that often. But that's not the way to live the Christian life. And I'm not saying get rid of the TV, you can't play sports, you can't work hard for raises or more money, right? That's not what I'm saying. Those are not in of themselves bad things. But when you make yourself so busy by them that you push out your time with God in prayer or in his word, when you push that out of your schedule because of these things, or when your idols become so great in your eyes that you start to lose your love for God, that's a problem. That's a problem. Then there's a problem. But when you realize, hey, my spiritual walk with God, with Christ, is really of utmost importance. It's the only thing that will last past this life. When you start looking at life with more of an eternal perspective and living your life according to that, things change for the better. Maybe not physically, but maybe. Maybe not financially, again, maybe, perhaps. That's not the big focus though, because spiritually, you will thrive. I also want to say that living with an eternal perspective is not just about praying and reading your Bible. It's not just about spending time with God, though that's essential, right? But it's also about acting upon what you read, acting upon God's will, serving God. In James chapter 1, James says, "Put away all filthiness and rampant wickedness, and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls." As believers, we have repented of the filth and wickedness of our sin and continue to gradually improve, continuing to put our filthiness, our wickedness away. But there's more to it. Put away all filthiness and rampant wickedness, and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves, right? We can't just read the word and pray to God and then immediately forget it and go the rest of our day or night thinking nothing about God. We need to take what we learn in the Bible and apply it to our daily lives, serving God and glorifying him in all that we do. We don't just need to make God first in our lives. We need to make him central so that he is a part of everything that we do. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks intently at his natural face in a mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away and at once forgets what he was like. That's not what we want. We don't want to be reading the Bible and then forgetting everything that it says as soon as we put it down. We want what we read to affect our lives. We want to put it into practice. We want to put into practice what God tells us in his word, because that's what matters. Everything else, when we come to the end of our lives, like Dagon, will fail us. So we have to think ahead. We have to think eternally. We have to think of what really matters. Telling people about Jesus and how he died for their sins and rose again for their salvation. That's something you can take with you to heaven. Because someone might, because of that, be coming with you, showing people love and kindness, like it says is the second greatest commandment in the Bible after loving God. To love your neighbor as yourself, right? You want to show that God is loving by the love that you show, that he works through you. We have to think ahead, okay? We have to think eternally. We have to ask God for help with that, for sure. I always seem to say that at the end of sermons because what you read in the Bible is hard to do. What you read in the Bible to do is hard for us to do with the sinful flesh that we have, right? But we have a strong God that we can lean on, who we can ask for help to keep our minds on what is eternal and what matters, to keep our minds away from idolizing what this world has to offer. Because in the end, all those things that the world offers, they fall short. Right? If you put God even on the same level in your heart as your idols, they will fall before him. Just like we see with Dagon. And as we see, it doesn't go well with the Philistines afterward. There's a better way to live life than to serve idols. In other words, there's a better way to live life than to chase after the things of this world. It's as simple as the parents who tell their kid, don't eat that much candy. It might be awesome in the moment, but later, you'll be really sick. Think ahead. And it's similar with us, think ahead. Think eternal. The things of this world might be awesome now, but later on, they will bring you nothing.